Admiral Quan Deho stood on the command bridge of the defense station, watching his world burn. Through the thick glass windows, he could see the red glow of enemy ships spreading across the darkness of space like drops of blood in black water. They moved with the slow confidence of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. 3 months ago, nobody had even heard of the hegemony. The outer colonies were peaceful farming worlds and mining stations, places where families went to build new lives among the stars. Children played in the domed cities while their parents worked the soil of alien worlds or dug precious metals from asteroid belts. It was a good life, a quiet life. Then the red ships came. The first attack hit the mining colony on Kepler 442b. The defense satellites went silent within minutes. When the rescue ships arrived 2 days later, they found nothing but empty space where a city of 50,000 people used to be. No wreckage, no bodies, no sign that humans had ever lived there at all. Just bare rock under an alien sun. Admiral Quan had been commanding the outer defense ring for 8 years. He was a practical man who believed in preparation and hard work. His fleet of 12 patrol cruisers kept the trade routes safe from pirates and helped lost ships find their way home. It was honest work protecting honest people. But 12 patrol cruisers meant nothing against what was coming toward them now. The hegemony fleet filled his view screens like a red tide. Their ships were massive things, each one the size of a city, covered in armor that seemed to drink in the light of distant stars. They moved in perfect formation, hundreds of them, more ships than Quan had ever seen in one place. The computer counted them automatically. 317 enemy vessels approaching at steady speed. Behind him, his communications officer was receiving the same message over and over, from every human settlement in the outer rim. The same desperate words from colony after colony. "They're here, send help. Please send help." But there was no help to send. Lieutenant Park Minna turned from her sensor station, her young face pale with fear. "Admiral, I'm reading energy signatures like nothing in our database. Their weapons are charging some kind of plasma system. Power levels are off the charts." Quan nodded slowly. He had seen the reports from the colonies that managed to send out distress signals before going dark. The enemy weapons could burn through the strongest human shields like paper. They could melt a battleship in seconds, turn a space station into glowing gas with a single shot. "How long until they reach firing range?" he asked. 22 minutes, sir. 22 minutes. Quan looked around his command center at the men and women who had served with him for years. Good people, all of them. They deserved better than to die in a hopeless battle against an enemy they couldn't even hurt. The defense station's weapons were designed to stop pirates, not an alien armada. Their missiles would barely scratch the paint on those red ships. Their energy cannons were toys compared to what the enemy was bringing to this fight. On the main screen, a new signal appeared. It was Captain Lee Hanna aboard the transport ship Morning Glory, requesting permission to dock. Her ship was loaded with refugees from the inner colonies, families who had watched their homes disappear in flashes of red light. "Permission granted," Quan said. "Tell Captain Lee to make it quick." The Morning Glory was one of dozens of civilian ships that had been running from the advancing enemy fleet. They carried everyone who could escape, children, elderly people, anyone who couldn't fight. The lucky ones found space on the transports. The unlucky ones stayed behind and were never heard from again. Quan had seen the recordings from the colonies that fell. The enemy didn't just destroy human settlements. They erased them, removed every trace that people had ever lived there. Scientists called it some kind of molecular disintegration weapon, but Quan didn't care about the technical terms. What mattered was that millions of people were gone and more would follow. His second-in-command, Commander Yu Jae-sung, approached with a datapad in his hands. "Sir, we've received updates from Earth Command. The main fleet is still 3 days away. The closest reinforcements are 48 hours out. And we have 20 minutes before they start shooting," Quan replied. "Send out the evacuation order. All non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Military staff to remain at their posts. Sir, shouldn't we consider falling back? The station isn't worth dying for." Quan looked at the tactical display showing the Morning Glory and other refugee ships still docking with the station. Families were still transferring from ship to ship. Children being carried by parents who had lost everything they owned. If the station fell back now, those people would be caught in open space when the enemy arrived. "We hold the line, Commander." "That's what we do." The red ships continued their approach, and Quan could see more details on the sensors now. Their hulls were covered in some kind of living metal that shifted and changed as he watched. The enemy ships looked more like giant sea creatures than anything built in a factory. They pulsed with inner light, as if something alive moved through their corridors. Intelligence reports said the hegemony was some kind of collective species that treated individual lives as meaningless. They had been expanding across the galaxy for centuries, absorbing or destroying every other intelligent race they encountered. Humans were just the latest species to get in their way. The communications board lit up with incoming messages. Colony governors asking for help that wasn't coming. Ship captains reporting impossible enemy capabilities. Military commanders requesting orders that Quan couldn't give because there were no good options left. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park called out, "the enemy fleet is slowing down. They're taking up attack formation." On the screen, the red ships spread out into a perfect sphere around the defense station. No matter which way the human ships tried to run, they would face enemy fire. It was a classic siege formation, designed to trap the prey and destroy it at leisure. The Morning Glory finished loading refugees and requested permission to depart. Captain Lee Hana's voice came over the comm channel, calm despite the approaching death. "Admiral, we have everyone we can fit. Thank you for the time." "Good luck, Captain. Take care of them." "We will, sir." "And Admiral, it's been an honor serving with you." The transport ship pulled away from the station and began moving toward the edge of the system, along with the other civilian vessels. They would try to reach the inner colonies where the main human fleet might still have a chance to protect them. Quan watched them go and felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. In 18 minutes, the enemy would open fire. His station would be destroyed and his people would die. But they had bought time for the refugees to escape. And sometimes that was all a soldier could do. The red ships hung in space around them like hungry wolves, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Their victory was certain. The mathematics were simple. Hundreds of advanced warships against one defense station and its handful of patrol cruisers. Nothing could change the outcome now, or so everyone thought. Captain Park Jinwoo woke up to the sound of alarms echoing through the corridors of the USS Blackstar. The ship that officially did not exist was hidden in the shadow of a dead moon, far from any trade route or patrol path. For 15 years, it had been humanity's most carefully guarded secret. Park rolled out of his narrow bunk and pulled on his uniform. The black fabric had no rank insignia, no name tags, nothing that would identify him or his crew if their bodies were ever found. They were ghosts in the military system, people who had been declared dead in the official records while they worked on humanity's darkest project. The corridor outside his quarters was dimly lit, with walls made of metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Blackstar was built from materials that existed only in theory, until the government's best scientists had figured out how to make them real. Every surface, every component, every system on the ship represented technology that was decades ahead of anything the regular military used. Park made his way to the bridge, passing crew members who moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had trained together for years. They were an unusual group, handpicked from military records that were supposed to be destroyed. Soldiers who had asked too many questions, scientists who had experimented with forbidden theories, engineers who had built things that weren't supposed to work. The bridge was a circular room with walls covered in displays that showed information in ways that would have confused a normal ship captain. Instead of simple readouts of speed and direction, the screens showed probability curves and quantum field measurements. The Blackstar navigated through space-time itself, not just the empty areas between planets. Chief Engineer Kim Sora was already at her station, her fingers dancing across controls that monitored the ship's experimental systems. She had been working on the Blackstar's quantum drive since before the ship was built, and she understood its mysteries better than anyone else alive. "Captain," she said without looking up from her displays, "we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the Outer Rim. The hegemony fleet has reached the defense stations." Park settled into his command chair and activated the main screen. The view showed intercepted communications from Admiral Kwan's station, messages that painted a picture of hopeless odds and certain defeat. The enemy had surrounded the human defenders and was preparing to destroy them. Lieutenant Commander Yoon Taemin turned from the communication station. He was a thin man with sharp eyes who had once been court-martialed for hacking into classified databases. Now his talent for breaking into secure systems served a higher purpose. "Sir, I'm tracking multiple civilian transports fleeing the battle zone. The Morning Glory and 17 other ships are trying to reach the inner colonies, but they won't make it. The hegemony has dispatched pursuit squadrons. Park studied the tactical information flowing across his screens. The red enemy ships were faster than anything in the human fleet, and their weapons could reach across impossible distances. The refugee ships would be caught and destroyed within hours. Behind him, the bridge crew worked at their stations with calm professionalism. These were people who had been kicked out of regular service for various reasons, but they were also some of the most talented individuals the military had ever produced. They understood that their unusual skills were exactly what this mission required. Dr. Choi Hyun-soo, the ship's science officer, looked up from his analysis station. He had been expelled from 3 different universities for conducting experiments that violated safety protocols. His theories about space and time had been called impossible by his former colleagues. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the enemy fleet. Their weapons operate on principles we don't fully understand, but they seem to manipulate matter at the molecular level. They're not just destroying our ships, they're erasing them from existence." Park nodded grimly. The reports from the fallen colonies had described the same phenomenon. People in buildings simply vanishing without leaving any trace behind. It was a weapon that violated everything humans thought they knew about physics. But the Blackstar had been built to fight enemies who didn't follow normal rules. 15 years ago, a small group of military planners had asked a dangerous question. What if humanity encountered an alien threat that was technologically superior in every way? What if conventional weapons, normal tactics, and traditional thinking were not enough to ensure survival? The answer was the Blackstar Project. A ship that would be built in secret, crewed by people who thought differently and equipped with weapons that operated outside the normal laws of science. It was humanity's insurance policy against the impossible. The ship's hull was constructed from quantum-stable materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its armor didn't just deflect attacks, it scattered them across parallel universes where they could cause no harm. The Blackstar could be in several places at once or nowhere at all, depending on what the situation required. Kim So-ra reported from her engineering station. "Captain, the quantum drive is operating within normal parameters. We can maintain dimensional phase for approximately 47 minutes of combat operations before needing to return to baseline reality." 47 minutes. It would have to be enough. The weapon systems were equally unusual. Instead of firing energy beams or explosive missiles, the Blackstar's main guns fired possibility itself. They could make enemy ships experience every potential form of destruction simultaneously, or trap them in time loops where death became a permanent state. Park had handpicked his crew from military, outcasts and academic rejects because normal people couldn't handle the psychological stress of operating outside reality. His weapons officer, Sergeant Bae Soo-jin, had been discharged for psychological instability after she started seeing patterns in quantum mechanics that drove other scientists to madness. Now, her unique form of insanity was exactly what they needed. Soo-jin, status on the main battery? "All quantum torpedoes are loaded and ready, Captain. The possibility cannons are charged to full capacity. The enemy won't know what hit them because technically, we won't be hitting them at all." The communications officer intercepted another transmission from the battle zone. Admiral Kwan's voice was calm but resigned as he ordered his remaining ships to prepare for a final attack. The defense station shields were failing under the enemy bombardment, and the last patrol cruisers were taking heavy damage. "Time until we can reach the battle zone?" Park asked. Yoon Taiman checked his calculations. "At maximum quantum displacement, we can arrive in 14 minutes, sir." "Do it. All hands prepare for combat operations. This is what we trained for." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, activating systems that existed in the spaces between normal and impossible. The Blackstar began to fade from normal space-time, becoming something that was neither fully real nor completely imaginary. Through the quantum field generators, reality twisted around the ship like water flowing around a stone. The laws of physics became suggestions rather than absolute rules. Cause and effect separated into parallel streams that could be woven together or torn apart as needed. Park felt the familiar sensation of existing in multiple states simultaneously. Part of him remained on the bridge giving orders to his crew. Another part of him was already at the battle zone, studying the enemy formation. A third version of himself was considering tactical options that wouldn't be invented for another century. The Blackstar slipped between dimensions like a ghost, moving through walls. In the normal universe, Admiral Kwan's battle was reaching its final moments. The red ships of the hegemony were closing in for the kill, confident in their inevitable victory. They had no idea that humanity's real weapon was about to arrive. A ship that didn't just fight battles, but rewrote the rules that determined who could win them. Fleet Master Zoroth stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the final phase of another perfect victory unfold on the tactical displays. The humans had gathered their pathetic fleet around the blue planet they called Earth. 53 primitive vessels against 300 of the hegemony's finest warships, the mathematics, were beautiful in their simplicity. Zoroth's species had conquered 47 star systems over the past 3 centuries. Every battle followed the same pattern: initial resistance, desperate counterattacks, and finally the complete erasure of another inferior race from the galaxy. The humans would be no different from all the others. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vrex, approached with the latest tactical analysis. Fleetmaster, our scouts report that the human defensive line consists mostly of converted cargo vessels and outdated patrol cruisers. Their largest ship is barely 1/10 the mass of our smallest destroyer. Zoroth nodded with satisfaction. The human ships were built for commerce and exploration, not war. Their weapons were crude kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams that could barely scratch hegemony armor. Their shields were static barriers that would collapse under the first serious attack. In contrast, the red ships of the hegemony were works of art and science combined. Each vessel was a living organism, grown rather than built, with armor that adapted to every form of attack. Their plasma cannons could reduce a mountain to gas, and their molecular disintegrators could erase matter from existence itself. Begin the final approach, Zoroth commanded. Standard siege formation. I want every human ship trapped in the kill zone when we open fire. The 300 red ships moved with fluid grace, spreading out in a perfect sphere around Earth's defensive fleet. Each vessel found its assigned position with mechanical precision, creating an unbreakable cage of death around the human forces. On the bridge of Earth's command ship, General Nam Yu-jin watched the enemy formation take shape on his tactical screens. He was an old soldier who had fought in every major conflict of the past 20 years, but he had never faced odds like these. The enemy outnumbered his fleet 6-1, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender demands from the enemy fleet. They want us to power down our weapons and prepare to be boarded. Nam Yu-jin almost smiled. After 3 months of watching colonies disappear without trace, the enemy thought humans would simply give up when cornered. They clearly didn't understand the species they were fighting. Send them our response, he said calmly. Tell them we'll see them in hell. The human fleet began moving into attack formation, their small ships clustering around the larger vessels like wolves preparing to fight a pack of lions. They knew they couldn't win, but they would make the enemy pay for every meter of space. Captain Cho Min-soo commanded the battlecruiser Indomitable, humanity's most powerful warship. It was an aging vessel that had been scheduled for retirement before the war began, but now it served as the flagship of Earth's last stand. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted their fate. All weapons charged and ready, Captain, his tactical officer reported. We have solid firing solutions on 12 enemy targets. Cho Min-soo studied the tactical display, looking for any weakness in the enemy formation. The red ships moved like a single organism, each one supporting the others in a pattern that left no gaps to exploit. It was perfect military science executed with machine-like precision, but perfection sometimes had its own weaknesses. Target the lead ships in the outer ring, he ordered. If we can break their formation even slightly, it might create an opening for the smaller ships to exploit. It was a desperate plan with almost no chance of success, but it was better than dying without a fight. Fleetmaster Zoroth watched the human ships maneuver with mild interest. Their tactics were crude but showed some understanding of basic military principles. It would not save them, but it might provide a few minutes of entertainment before the inevitable conclusion. All ships prepare to engage, he commanded. I want this finished quickly. The humans have already wasted enough of our time. The red ships began charging their weapons, energy building in their organic hulls like blood flowing through veins. Their plasma cannons glowed with inner fire, ready to unleash destruction that could melt asteroids and boil oceans. The human fleet continued its approach, their primitive engines pushing the small ships toward an enemy they could not hope to defeat. Their courage was admirable in its futility. On Earth, billions of people watched the battle unfold on their communication screens. In the great cities, families gathered around their displays, holding each other as they waited to learn their fate. Children asked questions their parents couldn't answer. What would happen if the fleet failed? Where would they go if Earth fell? In the military command bunkers deep underground, staff officers worked frantically to coordinate any remaining defenses. Surface-to-space missiles were prepared for launch, though everyone knew they would have little effect against the enemy's advanced shields. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases, piloted by volunteers who knew they were flying suicide missions. General Nam Yu-jin received reports from every defensive position on the planet. The orbital platforms were ready. The moon bases were prepared to fight. Every human military asset in the solar system was committed to this single battle. It still wouldn't be enough. The enemy fleet completed its formation and began the final approach. 300 red ships moved with predatory grace toward 50 human vessels that looked like toys in comparison. The difference in size and power was so overwhelming that it seemed almost unfair. Fleetmaster Zoroth counted down the final moments before weapons range. His species had perfected the art of warfare over centuries of conquest. They knew exactly how to destroy an enemy fleet with minimum risk and maximum efficiency, 30 seconds to optimal firing position, his tactical officer reported. Zoroth looked forward to adding Earth to his list of conquered worlds. The humans had shown more spirit than most species, but spirit meant nothing against superior technology and overwhelming force. 20 seconds to weapons range. The human ships spread out in a defensive wall, their small forms silhouetted against the blue glow of their homeworld. They looked brave and determined and completely doomed. 10 seconds to engagement. Zoroth raised his hand to give the firing command. 3 centuries of victory had taught his people that the universe belonged to the strong, and the hegemony was the strongest force the galaxy had ever known. 5 seconds. The red ships reached optimal range, their weapons locked onto human targets. Their victory assured by mathematics and physics and the simple reality that the strong always defeated the weak. Fire when ready. But just as Zoroth's hand fell to signal the attack, something impossible happened. Space itself tore open like fabric being ripped apart, and from the wound in reality emerged something that should not have existed. A ship that was simultaneously there and not there, visible and invisible, real and imaginary. The USS Blackstar had arrived, and with it came the end of certainty itself. The USS Blackstar materialized between the hegemony fleet and Earth's defenders like a shadow stepping out of a nightmare. Where the human fleet looked small and desperate against the red enemy ships, the Blackstar looked wrong in ways that made experienced warriors feel uneasy without understanding why. Fleetmaster Zoroth stared at his tactical displays in growing confusion. The sensors showed contradictory readings for the new human vessel. Sometimes it registered as a ship slightly larger than their destroyers. Other times it appeared to be the size of a moon. Occasionally the sensors insisted it wasn't there at all, even though everyone could see it with their own eyes. "What is that thing?" Subcommander Vrex asked, his voice tight with concern. "Unknown vessel, this is Fleetmaster Zoroth of the Hegemony Warfleet. Identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came back in perfectly clear hegemony language, spoken with an accent that sounded like someone reading their own death sentence. "This is Captain Park Jinwoo of the USS Blackstar. We're here to discuss the terms of your surrender." Zoroth felt his blood temperature rise in anger. One ship, even a mysterious one, challenging an entire fleet was either madness or the deepest form of insult. Either way, it would be answered with fire. All ships target the unknown vessel. Destroy it immediately. 300 plasma cannons turned toward the Blackstar and fired simultaneously. The combined energy release was enough to crack a planet's crust. The space around the human ship filled with deadly fire that should have vaporized any target instantly. The beams struck the Blackstar and simply disappeared. Not reflected, not absorbed, not deflected. They vanished as if they had never existed at all, leaving the black ship floating undamaged in empty space. On the bridge of the Blackstar, Chief Engineer Kim So-ra watched her quantum displacement readings with professional satisfaction. Phase variance holding steady, Captain. Their energy weapons are being scattered across 17 different dimensions. It's like trying to shoot a ghost with a flashlight. Captain Park Jin-woo stood at the center of his bridge, surrounded by displays that showed information in ways that would have driven normal people insane. Probability charts that changed as he watched them. Tactical readings that showed enemy ships existing in multiple states simultaneously. Weapon systems that fired mathematics instead of matter. Their turn, he said quietly. Lieutenant Commander Yoon Taemin activated the Blackstar's primary weapons array. The ship's main guns didn't look like traditional cannons. They were crystalline structures that hummed with energy that existed in the spaces between real and imaginary numbers. The first shot wasn't visible to the naked eye. It was a concentrated beam of pure possibility that struck the lead hegemony destroyer and presented it with every potential form of destruction simultaneously. The red ship experienced its death in 1,000 different ways at once. Its hull cracked from age while being melted by heat, while being frozen by absolute cold, while being torn apart by gravity, while being dissolved by acid that had never existed. The crew died of old age and laser fire and explosive decompression and diseases that infected only their specific biology. All in the same instant. When the multiple deaths finished overlapping, there was nothing left but empty space and confused sensor readings. Fleet Master. Zoroth watched his ship vanish and felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. Uncertainty. All ships. Concentrate fire on the human vessel. Maximum power. The hegemony fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, molecular disintegrators, gravity bombs, and weapons that had no names in human language. The combined attack contained enough destructive force to sterilize a solar system. The Blackstar absorbed it all without apparent effort, then replied with weapons that violated every law of physics that the hegemony understood. The second enemy ship to die found itself turned inside out, its armor protecting empty space while its crew suffocated in the vacuum that now occupied the interior of their vessel. The third ship aged 10,000 years in 3 seconds, its organic hull withering and cracking before crumbling into ancient dust. Sergeant Bae, Soo-jin operated the quantum torpedo launchers with the calm precision of someone who had learned to think in mathematical concepts that didn't technically exist. Each torpedo she fired carried a small piece of controlled chaos that rewrote the rules of reality in a localized area. One torpedo struck a hegemony cruiser and convinced its atoms that they were actually empty space. The ship simply ceased to be solid, its matter dispersing like smoke in a breeze. Another torpedo hit a destroyer and trapped it in a time loop, where the moment of its destruction repeated endlessly, the crew dying and being reborn and dying again in an infinite cycle. Dr. Choi Hyun-soo monitored the battle from his science station, taking readings that would revolutionize human understanding of physics if anyone lived long enough to study them. Captain, the enemy's adaptive armor is actually making things worse for them. The more it tries to adapt to our weapons, the more it becomes entangled with the quantum paradoxes we're generating. The hegemony ships began to turn their greatest advantage against themselves. Their living armor, designed to learn from each attack and become stronger, started learning from weapons that operated outside normal spacetime. The armor adapted by becoming partially unreal, which caused the ships to exist in multiple dimensions at once, without the technology to control the effect. Ships began phasing in and out of reality randomly. Some vanished for minutes at a time before reappearing in different locations. Others split into multiple versions of themselves, each one solid but occupying the same space, creating impossible overlaps that tore the vessels apart from within. Captain Cho Min-soo watched the battle from the bridge of the Indomitable, his experienced mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "What kind of weapons are those?" he asked his tactical officer. "I don't think they're weapons in any traditional sense, sir. They seem to be firing concepts instead of matter. That ship is fighting with pure mathematics. The human defensive fleet found itself with nothing to do but watch as a single impossible vessel dismantled an enemy armada, through methods that belonged more to philosophy than military science. The Blackstar moved through the hegemony formation like a shark through a school of fish, but a shark that could exist in several places at once and bite through the fabric of reality. Fleet Master. Zoroth realized that his 3 centuries of military experience meant nothing against an enemy that refused to follow the basic rules of existence. His ships were dying in ways that his sensors couldn't properly measure, destroyed by weapons that his science couldn't explain. "Tactical retreat," he ordered. "All ships fall back to safe distance." But the Blackstar had other ideas. As the red ships tried to withdraw, they found that space itself had become unreliable around them. Some ships that tried to retreat discovered they were actually moving forward. Others found that their engines were pushing them sideways through dimensions they couldn't perceive. The Blackstar wasn't just winning the battle. It was rewriting the laws that determined what victory meant. Sub-Commander Vreck stared at his instruments in growing panic. "Fleetmaster, our ships are reporting impossible readings. Some of them claim to be in multiple locations simultaneously. Others say they're fighting battles that haven't happened yet." Park Jin-woo felt the quantum drive pushing against the boundaries of what was possible. Each reality-bending attack moved the Blackstar further from normal space-time. But that was the price of fighting a war that existed outside conventional physics. "Time remaining in quantum phase?" he asked. 37 minutes before we risk catastrophic dimensional displacement," Kim So-ra replied. 37 minutes to end a war that had seemed hopeless just moments before. The Hegemony fleet, which had conquered 47 star systems, was learning that there were some enemies that couldn't be defeated through superior numbers or advanced technology. Sometimes the universe had other plans. The battle had become something beyond conventional warfare. The USS Blackstar moved through the Hegemony formation like a force of nature that had decided to take sides in a conflict. Where normal ships followed predictable paths through space, the Blackstar existed in multiple locations at once, attacking from directions that shouldn't have been possible. Fleetmaster Zoroth watched another of his cruisers die in a way that his 3 centuries of military experience couldn't explain. The ship folded in on itself like origami made of metal and flesh, its crew trapped in spaces that were geometrically impossible. Their final transmission was a scream that lasted exactly -7 seconds. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. Sub-Commander Vrex checked his tactical displays with shaking hands. Half the readings made no sense, showing ships that were simultaneously destroyed and undamaged, crews that were dead but still sending reports, weapons that had been fired but never existed. 47 vessels confirmed destroyed, sir. Another 31 are reporting dimensional displacement errors. They exist but cannot interact with normal spacetime. For practical purposes, they are no longer part of our fleet. 78 ships lost to a single enemy vessel. The mathematics of warfare had been turned upside down and set on fire. On the bridge of the Blackstar, Lieutenant Commander Yoon Tae-min coordinated attacks that required existing in several timeline streams simultaneously. His tactical displays showed the enemy fleet as it had been, and as it could potentially become, all overlapping in patterns that would have driven a normal mind to madness. "Enemy formation is collapsing," he reported to Captain Park Jin-woo. "Their command structure can't adapt to quantum warfare principles. They keep trying to use conventional tactics against unconventional reality." Park Jin-woo nodded, but his expression was troubled. Each quantum displacement was pushing the Blackstar further from baseline reality. The ship and crew were designed for this kind of combat, but even revolutionary technology had limits that couldn't be ignored. "Time remaining?" he asked Chief Engineer Kim So-ra. 28 minutes before we risk permanent dimensional displacement," she replied. "The quantum field generators are operating at maximum capacity. If we push them any harder, we might not be able to return to normal spacetime." The Hegemony ships that remained functional were learning to fear space itself. Their adaptive armor had become a liability, trying to protect against attacks that existed in theoretical mathematics rather than physical reality. The more the armor learned, the more it became entangled with impossible concepts that unraveled the ships from within. Dr. Choi Hyun-soo monitored the quantum effects spreading through the enemy fleet. "Captain, the Hegemony's own technology is turning against them. Their living ships are trying to evolve defenses against weapons that operate outside the normal universe. It's causing system-wide breakdowns in their fleet's coherence." A Hegemony destroyer suddenly split into 17 different versions of itself, each one solid and real but occupying slightly different dimensional coordinates. The 17 ships immediately began firing at each other, each one convinced that the others were enemy. Duplicates. Another enemy vessel began aging rapidly as its adaptive systems tried to protect against a time-based Attack that existed only as a mathematical possibility. The ship aged 1,000,000 years and 30 seconds, its organic hull becoming a fossil floating in space, while its crew became dust inside their armor. Sergeant Bei Su Jin fired another quantum torpedo, this one designed to convince a hegemony cruiser that it had never been built in the first place. The ship didn't explode or break apart. It simply stopped being something that had ever existed, leaving its crew floating in space with confused memories of serving on a vessel that reality now insisted was impossible. Fleetmaster Zoroth realized that his fleet was fighting something that treated the laws of physics as rough suggestions rather than absolute rules. Every tactical manual, every strategic principle, every lesson learned from 3 centuries of conquest meant nothing against an enemy that could rewrite the fundamental nature of existence. All remaining ships, "Prepare the stellar detonator," he commanded. Sub-Commander Vrex turned to stare at his superior in shock. "Sir, that weapon is intended for use against star systems, not individual ships. The energy release could destroy everything within 3 light minutes of the detonation point, including our own forces. If we cannot defeat this human ship, then no one will survive to report our failure." Zoroth replied grimly. "The hegemony does not accept defeat. If we cannot have this sector of space, then we will ensure that no one else can have it either." The stellar detonator was the hegemony's ultimate weapon, a device that could cause stars to collapse and explode by manipulating the nuclear forces that held atomic nuclei together. It had been used only twice in their history, both times to destroy entire solar systems that had refused to surrender. On Earth, General Nam Yu Jin watched the impossible battle continue on his tactical screens. The single mysterious human ship had destroyed or disabled more than half of an enemy fleet that had seemed unstoppable just an hour before. But something was wrong with the sensor readings. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy buildup in the enemy flagship. The signature matches theoretical models for stellar collapse weaponry." Nam Yu Jin felt his blood turn cold. A stellar detonator fired in Earth's solar system would turn the sun into a nova, destroying every planet and moon within billions of kilometers. Humanity's victory would become the extinction of their entire species. Captain Cho Min-soo received the same readings on the Indomitable. His science officer ran the calculations twice before delivering the news that no one wanted to hear. "Captain, if they detonate that device, our sun will become unstable within minutes. Solar flares will sterilize every world in the system before the final collapse." Park Jin-woo felt the stellar detonator's energy signature building on his sensors and realized that winning the battle might not be enough to save humanity. The hegemony was choosing mutual destruction over defeat, and their weapon operated on principles that even the Blackstar couldn't simply deflect or absorb. "Options?" he asked his crew. Kim So-ra ran calculations on her quantum field projectors. "We could phase the detonator into a parallel dimension, but the energy requirements would drain our power completely. We'd be stranded outside normal space-time permanently." Dr. Choi Hyun-soo offered another possibility. "We could create a localized space-time fold around the weapon, containing the explosion in a pocket dimension. But the dimensional stress would tear the Blackstar apart." Yoon Tae-min suggested a third alternative. "We could quantum tunnel the entire enemy fleet into deep space, far enough away that their weapon couldn't affect our solar system. But we'd have to go with them to maintain the tunnel, and there would be no way back." Park Jin-woo looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him into impossible battles. They were outcasts and misfits, people who had been deemed too dangerous for normal military service. But they had become humanity's greatest heroes by embracing the very qualities that made them unsuitable for conventional warfare. "All hands, prepare for dimensional translation," he announced over the ship's communication system. Kim So-ra understood immediately. They were going to phase the stellar detonator, the remaining hegemony fleet, and themselves into a dimension where the weapon couldn't harm Earth. It was a one-way trip to somewhere outside normal reality, but it would save 8 billion human lives. The crew of the Blackstar looked at each other across the bridge. They had always known this mission might require the ultimate sacrifice. They just hadn't expected it to involve sacrificing their very existence rather than just their lives. Outside, the stellar detonator continued building toward the point where it would turn humanity's sun into a weapon of mass extinction. Time was running out, and only one choice remained, the choice between humanity's survival and their own. Captain Park Jin-woo felt the stellar detonator's energy signature reaching critical levels and made the hardest decision of his life. The USS Blackstar could stop the weapon from destroying Earth's sun, but only by taking it and themselves into a place where neither could ever return. All hands. "This is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "In 30 seconds, we will initiate full-dimensional translation. We're going to phase the enemy fleet and their weapon into parallel space along with ourselves. There will be no coming back from this." Around the bridge, his crew worked at their stations with calm professionalism. They had always known this mission might require the ultimate sacrifice. They just hadn't expected to sacrifice their very existence rather than simply their lives. Chief Engineer Kim Sora's hands moved across her controls, preparing the quantum drive for an operation that had never been attempted before. "Captain, I'm routing all power to the dimensional translation matrix. We'll have one chance to get this right." Dr. Choi Hyun-soo monitored the space-time distortions building around the ship. "The dimensional stress is off the charts. We're about to tear a hole in reality itself." Lieutenant Commander Yoon Tae-min sent final tactical data to the human defensive fleet. "Earth forces maintain safe distance. What happens next is going to be very loud in dimensions you can't see." Sergeant Bae Soo-jin armed every quantum weapon system on the ship. Where they were going, conventional physics wouldn't apply, but they might need every advantage they could get in spaces between spaces. Fleet Master Zoroth felt his flagship shudder as impossible forces began acting on its hull. The human ship was doing something that violated every law of science his people understood. Space itself was becoming unstable around the hegemony fleet. "What are they doing?" Sub-Commander Vrex demanded, watching his instruments report readings that shouldn't have been possible. "They're taking us with them," Zoroth realized. "Wherever they're going, they intend for us to accompany them." The stellar detonator reached the point of no return. In normal space, it would have triggered a chain reaction that turned Earth's sun into a nova within minutes. But normal space was no longer where the weapon existed. Park Jin-woo gave the final command. "Execute dimensional translation. All hands brace for reality displacement." The quantum drive engaged with a sound like the universe screaming. The USS Blackstar, the remaining hegemony fleet, and the stellar detonator were pulled out of normal space-time and into the vast emptiness between dimensions. The transition felt like being turned inside out, while falling upward through solid matter. Every atom in their bodies existed in multiple states simultaneously, before settling into a new form of existence that was neither fully real nor completely imaginary. When the chaos ended, they found themselves in a place that had no name, because naming it would have been impossible. It was space without distance, time without duration, existence without substance. The laws of physics didn't work here because physics itself was just a memory from somewhere else. The stellar detonator activated in this non-place, releasing enough energy to destroy a solar system. But there was no solar system here to destroy, no matter to convert to energy, no space for the explosion to expand into. The weapon fired and accomplished nothing, its ultimate power meaningless in a realm where power itself had no definition. Fleet Master Zoroth found that his ship still existed, but in ways that hurt to think about. His crew was alive but not living, present but not there, thinking thoughts that existed outside the concept of time. "Where are we?" Sub-Commander Vrex asked, though the question took several eternities to form and had no meaning when it arrived. "Nowhere," Zoroth replied, and the word contained all the despair of a warrior who had discovered that victory and defeat were both illusions. The hegemony fleet hung in the non-space like monuments to their own failure. Their adaptive armor tried to adjust to an environment that had no properties to adapt to. Their living ships attempted to evolve for survival in a place where evolution was a concept that had never been invented. Meanwhile, the USS Blackstar and its crew found that they were better suited to existence outside normal reality. They had been trained for impossible situations, and this was perhaps the most impossible situation of all. "Status report," Park Jin-woo requested, though status was a word that meant nothing here. "All systems operating within acceptable parameters for non-existence," Kim Sora reported. "We're alive, aware, and absolutely unable to return to baseline reality. The enemy fleet is trapped here with us," Yoon Tae-min observed. "They can't harm Earth from this location, but they also can't die or escape or do anything except exist in a state of permanent frustration." Dr. Choi Hyun-soo made readings of their surroundings with instruments that measured things that weren't there. We're in a stable pocket dimension, completely isolated from normal spacetime. Nothing we do here can affect the real universe, and nothing from the real universe can reach us. Park Jin-woo felt a strange peace settle over him. They had saved humanity by accepting eternal exile. It was a victory that cost them everything, but it was still a victory. Back in normal space, Admiral Kwon Dae-ho watched from his defense station as the impossible battle simply ended. One moment, a mysterious black ship was fighting 300 alien vessels in ways that violated every law of physics. The next moment, all of them were gone, leaving only empty space and confused sensor readings. General Nam Yu-jin received reports from every observation station in the solar system. The enemy fleet had vanished completely, along with their stellar weapon and the mysterious ship that had saved Earth. The threat was over, but the cost remained unknown. Captain Cho Min-soo ordered his fleet to search for survivors, though the sensors showed nothing but empty space where the battle had taken place. The Blackstar and its crew had saved humanity by removing themselves from existence itself. On Earth, 8 billion people looked up at a sky that was no longer filled with the threat of alien invasion. Children played in the streets while their parents tried to understand what had happened. The colonies began rebuilding, and the ships returned to their peaceful routines among the stars. But sometimes, in the deepest parts of space, long-range sensors detected signals that shouldn't have existed. Ghost transmissions from dimensions that weren't there, carrying messages from a crew that had sacrificed existence itself to protect their species. The USS Blackstar continued its patrol in the spaces between realities, crewed by heroes who had become legends by accepting that some victories required giving up everything that made victory meaningful. They drifted through non-space and non-time, forever aware, forever vigilant, forever protecting humanity from threats that existed outside the normal universe. Fleet Master Zoroth and his remaining ships shared their exile, trapped in dimensions where conquest was impossible and defeat was permanent. They had learned too late that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their courage, but their willingness to embrace the impossible, when the impossible was what the situation demanded. And in the dark between the stars, in the spaces that existed only in theory, the crew of the Blackstar kept watch over a universe they could no longer touch, ensuring that no other alien empire would ever again mistake humanity for easy prey. Their victory had been inevitable after all. The universe had simply needed to learn new definitions of what victory could mean.